Today, our topic is spiritual dimensions of suicide. And we'll discuss this concept of suicide, which is something that most of us find very difficult to comprehend and even accept. And in the recent months, as some of you said earlier, there's been increasing numbers of suicides within circles of people we know or know of. And I'm sure as you look wider, you will notice that it's a sharply rising trend. It's actually a seriously alarming trend, and that's why we decided to dedicate a full webinar to this subject today. And suicide is also not a subject people like to discuss. It's a difficult subject. It's a heavy subject. But hey, we have to do it all. And I'm hoping that today we will approach it from a not so heavy direction and perhaps from a more hopeful and a positive direction in terms of what we can do. So what does the published literature say about suicide? So the first one is that suicide is death caused by injuring oneself with intent to die. The other is suicide is death caused by an intentional act of self-harm that is designed to be lethal. So these are the sort of general definitions of suicide, and I'm sure that all of us at a material level understand that suicide is a process where one takes one's life. Suicide is actually the most extreme measure that a human being can take, and its consequences are devastating to those that they leave behind. Because most of the time the loved ones don't even know or understand why. Why did it happen? And the answer to this question may remain permanently unknown, which makes the grieving process even more difficult. And I also know of some people who have grieved all their lives over this. So it's something extremely serious that we all have to take with that level of depth, because we all can contribute to preventing suicide and helping us as a humanity come over this trend and reverse it. Now, there are numerous reasons, theories, psychological perspectives there on suicide, and those of you who are interested in the material dimension more, you may wish to research it online. But today I would like to approach the concept of suicide from the spiritual perspective. And for that, I've invited our friendly angels, Cyrus and Luminous, to help us understand in simple language what can be a rather complex subject. So, welcoming Cyrus and Luminous, and Cyrus says, look, let us start by understanding the journey of the soul in the material world, which is a very short passage in eternity. It's almost like the blink of an eye. It's that short. But a soul manifests in this physical form to gain experience and grow in knowledge and light. And this is something we've talked about many times before, so I won't repeat it. But Cyrus says, every soul comes into this world with a purpose. And it comes to experience life. Experience life is an important word. And achieve the learning that it needs to ascend and grow and complete its journey. And accordingly, based on what the soul wishes to achieve, it makes a bond with the Creator called a soul bond, which sets the karmic compass for the soul's journey. And this karmic compass helps the soul accomplish its purpose in the material world. Now, these are some basic principles to start with. And here, I'd like to mention that we have 3 videos on the soul and the karmic journey. And I do recommend you revisit them, because there's lots of very valuable knowledge to contemplate. The first video, which is on our YouTube channel and on our website, is Understanding Karma and Its Resolution. The second video is Knowing the Soul and Reincarnation. And the third is How to Decipher Deja Vu and the Future. So these are 3, and these videos are all interconnected. So I think you're going to find this subject very, very interesting to revisit. So Cyrus says, so here the soul is, living in the material world, experiencing everything it sought to experience. To facilitate its journey through the material world, the soul is endowed with 3 unique and intricate bodies, which it has to harness collectively with balance and harmony in order to derive the experiences and knowledge that it has come to achieve. So it needs these three bodies. And what are these three bodies, I asked. And Cyrus replies, they are, number one is the physical body, which is your biological body. Two is the mental body or the body of thought. And three is the emotional body or the impulse body, to be more precise. And all these three bodies have a life of their own, each one taking a unique form. They're all different. And together, they are driven by the life force that comes from the soul. So every soul needs to engage with these three bodies in balance and harmony during its passage through the material world. So Luminous added, in fact, this is one of the soul's purposes of life in the material world, achievement of harmony at all levels, including its three bodies. Certainly not an easy task. But those of you who are following the webinars on the 10 stages of the soul, you will better understand the role and importance of this harmony that we're talking about. So Cyrus says, now let us take a few moments to understand these three bodies. The first one is the physical body. The physical body is comprised of a complex cellular biological meshwork driven by the life energy that comes from the soul. This is what keeps it alive. And in addition to its own life energy, the biological body also engages with the living energies of thought that come from the second body, and the powerful impulse energies of emotions that come from the third body. So they all function together, all these three bodies. So they are like three separate roots of a tree. And these roots spread under the soil in different directions, unseen. But they emerge above the soil together as one solid tree trunk that is visible to all. What you see as the tree trunk is the biological body. And the other two remain concealed or unseen within this body, but they are very powerful and they have a huge impact. So that's how the three bodies come together, one being the seen one and two being the unseen ones. And while the three bodies together are strong in balance, when in balance, the biological body on its own is not. It is fragile. The biological body has significant limitations that physically restrict what the soul can and cannot experience in this world. Let me share a very simple, light-hearted experience. A soul may want to experience letting go of fear. I hear so many young people go, I got to go by what I fear and I got to get it out of my system. So a soul wants to experience letting go of fear through either extreme sports or life-endangering sports or similar activities. And it will endeavor to gain this experience in every opportunity. But there are limits to what the body can and cannot handle. And we all know these limits. I mean, you cannot experience walking in volcanic lava. Your body would simply disintegrate. Or try to skydive with a last-minute parachute, and I wouldn't recommend that. Then there is the big limitation of the biological body's health, which is impacted, for example, by your thoughts, your lifestyles, your use and abuse of harmful substances, and indulgence in unhealthy physical practices, just to name a few. They all impact your body's health. And once the body becomes ill, the biological body, then there are further restrictions placed on the soul because the body now can do even less. And you all know that poor health is a major issue in the material world today. So Cyrus says, so from the point of view of the soul's journey in this world, good physical health is essential to accomplish its purpose. Poor physical health can actually slow down spiritual progress as well. And I agreed. I said, look, I fully agree with you because the soul absolutely needs a healthy body for its ascension. Actually, when a person focuses deeply in meditation, goes really deep, to that level, very powerful level of nothingness and zero thought, the level where the Creator can be experienced and realized. When a soul goes there, or when in meditation we reach that state, the body starts to secrete a waxy substance that accelerates its healing and even reverses its aging. Because now rapid spiritual progress of the soul is occurring, and this demands perfect physical health. So when you go in that direction, you actually revive your body and you reverse its aging. So a healthy physical body is crucial for the soul's journey. So Lumina says, okay, now let's look at the second body, which is the mind, or the body of thought, it is called. And the mind is integrally connected to the biological body and is more powerful than the biological body. You all heard the phrase mind over matter. Once you set your mind to something, it happens. And Lumina says, why don't you explain the three levels of the mind? And I said, sure. I mean, you start, and I've explained this to you before, you start with a lower level mind, which creates thoughts that are designed to allow you to survive and sustain yourself through this material world. So simple thoughts like I'm hungry, I need to go to the refrigerator, I take out something to eat, I eat, I'm fulfilled, end of story. So the lower level mind is very functional, very basic. Then there's the higher level mind, where we bring together thoughts and options and we make more complex decisions, like where should we live? Where should our kids go to school? What should I do to develop my career? You bring in a whole wider variety of thoughts. And the higher level mind processes them and helps achieve those decisions. So they are a lot more complicated than the lower level mind. And then there is the intellect, which is the border between the mind and the higher self or the soul. And it is the most enlightened level of the human mind. And the intellect makes the mind very, very powerful, because through the intellect, the mind can access powers of creation and manifestation. This is why when you set your mind to something, you can make it happen. And this is not true for the biological body, which is the most fragile of the three bodies. So with your intellect, you can have powers of manifestation. Biological body can't do that. It's a lot limited. It's very limited. So Lumina says, thoughts produced by the mind have life. And this life is different in nature to the life energy of the biological body. So it's a different type of energy. And the life of thought emanates from the mind and flows as seeds, which then germinate in the minds and lives of others near and far, creating events and experiences. And this is how the material world operates. This is what makes this world a home of experiences and knowledge. It all emanates from the life of thought. I heard that we have a very good video on thought which explains these concepts in far greater depth, and I recommend you watch it. It's also on the website and on our website and YouTube channel. It's called Harnessing Our Power of Thought. It's a real fun video. So Cyrus continued, he said, just as the body has limitations of its own, so does the mind. Just like the biological body is limited by its health and how it is cared for, same applies to the mind, the body of thought. You can all visually see the physical illness and its effects on the biological body. When you see someone unwell, you immediately take him or her to the hospital because you can see it. But mental health is not so obvious. And human society's reaction to mental health has historically been very poor, unprepared, and often insensitive, Cyrus said. Cyrus and Lumina say we find this very surprising for a society of intelligent human beings. Until recently, people with poor mental health were simply discarded or placed in isolation or sent off to ill-equipped mental institutions that made them even worse. So think of the impact of the rejection by society inflicted upon the mentally ill. It's appalling, wouldn't you say? What choices are they left with? Human society is so poorly prepared that it unknowingly leads the mentally ill towards extreme measures, such as suicide. And Cyrus says, Luminous and I are glad to see that mental health is finally being taken more seriously in some parts of the world. As a result of education and awareness, more and more is happening, but a lot more needs to happen very soon. And he said, we urge you all today to start devoting time towards becoming helpers and spokespersons for your fellow beings who are suffering from mental illness. When you detect signs of mental illness, act immediately to help the person, whether you know them or not. Spread this awareness, and you will make your world a much better place and save millions from needless and devastating suffering. And Cyrus says, we will explain to you in a few moments the spiritual dimensions of suicide that are rooted in mental illness, to help you understand what happens behind what your material eyes do not see. Before we do that, we have to contemplate the third body, the impulse body, which is comprised of your emotions. Because this body of emotions is in fact the most significant, or can be the most significant limiting factors of the mind. Remember, we said that the biological body cannot walk on lava because of the scorching heat, it would disintegrate. Similarly, an uncontrolled impulse body is similar, it's no different. It places the mind in untenable states that can threaten its survival. The impulse body has a life of its own, which differs in nature from the life of the biological body and the body of thought. So there are three different types of lives that the soul is maintaining through these three bodies to get its experience and journey through the world. The life forces of the impulse body are extremely powerful and intense. They drive feelings, reactions, and energetic impulses that traverse the body without any limitation. As its name implies, the impulse body invokes powerful emotional forces which can tear through your biological body and damage its organs and cells. So the energy of these impulses can also destabilize the mind and make it very ill. And these impulses are capable of destroying the balance and harmony of the three bodies if allowed to. So the impulse body is like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it can be highly beneficial because emotions can complete life experiences in a holistic manner. Now, what does that mean? So, for example, you're taking a look at a really nice piece of art. You start by looking at the physical appearance of the art, and it appeals to you. Then the mind releases thoughts that deeply analyze the artwork to take in its message as completely as possible. So that second step is the mind engaged. And then the emotions are invoked. And these emotions attach you to the art and its message in very deep and profound ways. So emotions complete experiences in a holistic way. And these three bodies, this is how they function to give you a holistic experience of life event by event. So that's where the impulse body is very positive, very helpful. Now the negative side of the impulse body comes from the release of uncontrolled, powerful, and often destructive emotions that can directly damage the mind and the biological body. And concentration of these powerful negative emotions can destroy the organs if allowed to, and then this can make the body very, very ill. So that's the other side of the double-edged sword. So I asked, how can one manage the impulse body to regulate its negative energy? What should we do? And Cyrus replied, you can control your impulse body through the power of the body, mind, and higher self. Body, mind, and higher self in an aligned manner. So he says, when you see a raging fire, what do you do to extinguish it? You pour cool water on it and you cut the oxygen supply to the fire. Then the fire goes off. Therefore, peace, stillness, and balance, are the best countermeasures for impulses that have become fires in one's life. These measures can also prevent impulse fires from being lit in the first place. So I asked, how does one bring peace, stillness, and balance in one's life? What should we do? So Cyrus replied, through meditation, contemplation, patience, and good mental and biological health. These are the four key points. He said meditation creates peace and stillness, and it can be practiced daily at a spiritual level in the early hours of the morning. And it can also be practiced frequently through the day via anchor thought, where you consciously establish yourself in a well-grounded state of being. When you do this, your mind and body become engaged with your higher self. They are now in balance. They are now aligned. This is how you do it. Your impulse body cannot flare up under these conditions. It just can't. It therefore remains calm and regulated. So I said, we have a short video on meditation of anchor thought, and most of you have practiced it, but those who haven't, please do, and you'll realize how empowering it is. It's a great tool. It's called anchoring your thoughts. So Cyrus continues, he said, the next after meditation is contemplation. Now, when you contemplate the events and experiences of your life, you gain wisdom and knowledge. This wisdom is very powerful, because it gives you the ability to become discerning. Discerning is an important word. You can discern between what deserves a reaction from you and what doesn't. That's what wisdom gives us. The power of discernment is like a leash you tie on your pet dog. It will not walk away from you and get into trouble because of that leash. Wisdom and power of discernment are leashes that can regulate the impulse body and let it remain on the positive side. So create it, use it. So then there is patience. And this is the key power that you must always build upon. Patience brings clarity. It slows down your reactions. Remember, the fuel for a fire is oxygen. The fuel for flare-up of your impulse body is your impatient reactions. Remember, calm and patient reactions keep the impulse body well regulated. So you can regulate the impulse body. In fact, I remember a story once of Abraham Lincoln, where he had a falling out with one of his generals, and he was so angry, and he wrote his letter of termination and was going to fire this guy. Then something in his mind said, no, just keep it under your pillow, sleep on it, see how you feel tomorrow. So he put it under this pillow. Next morning, he read the letter of termination and said, great, I've got to do it because this guy has to go. Then he says, no, let me wait one more day. One more day. On the seventh day, he decides not to send it. And that saved him his entire mission. So patience is a key, and it's highly rewarding. Painful while you're at it, but highly rewarding. But this is one key way of controlling this powerful impulse body. Then Cyrus says, then there is your biological and mental health, which is the fourth point. If your body is healthy and well nourished and exercised, you will be able to release the built up negative emotional energies that are collecting in your body quite easily. If your body is unwell and you do not exercise it, the powerful energies of your emotions will continue to build up and grow, and at some point you will explode, or worse still, become gravely ill. So I ask, can you guide us on how best we can maintain good mental health? You've shown us tips for the impulse body, emotional health. What's your words of advice on mental health? How can we enhance ourselves and maintain good mental health? So Luminous said the same concepts I shared on emotional health apply to mental health. In addition, you said, I would say that the best way to care for your mind is to give it regular breaks and a variety of inputs that bring balance to it. So what sort of inputs do you recommend? I asked. And Luminous replied, in addition to using your mind for work, you must balance it with activities that raise its vibrational level to that of its natural life energy level. This is the most stable and peaceful level one can achieve in one's mind. And he said, you can think of your mind as being like an orchestra. You get the best music when all the instruments perform harmoniously. One instrument alone cannot deliver an orchestra. So using your mind for work alone is insufficient. You need more instruments in order to create balance in the mind. So I said, can you share some examples with us? What do we do? So Luminous replied, sure. He said the mind needs a wide variety of inputs to nourish it. For example, listening to peaceful and calming music. Music whose vibrations resonate with the mind. Music has the ability to trigger so many different and healthy biochemicals in the body too. Next is appreciating art. Take the time to appreciate art. It puts your mind at a whole different energy level. Reading and learning, history, literature, stories, again creates a different level for the mind, a different vibration. Reading is very important because you take in knowledge via a very different pathway. This enriches the mind. Next is taking time for prayer and meditation and anchoring yourself in peace and gratitude with anchor thought. Playing the sports you enjoy or hiking in nature, for example. These are all balancing factors for the mind. Or playing games that challenge the mind in positive ways like Scrabble or chess or whatever you enjoy. Learning a new language really sharpens the mind in a good way. Doing things that you find relaxing, whatever they may be. Having social interactions with real people rather than online contacts only. Direct human contact is extremely important because the three bodies need nurturing energies from your fellow beings, Luminous said. You don't get that online. You must have direct contact with human beings. And in COVID, we felt the impact of absence of that contact. Luminous says, allocating time to participate in community service, where you serve and help others. Because a lot of gratification and fulfillment comes from this process of giving. Again, varied inputs to the mind. It all raises the vibration levels of the mind significantly. And he said you can all come up with more solutions of your own. I've given you a few. But just like your biological body benefits from a variety of foods and nutrition, your mind and body of thought needs to be nourished by a variety of inputs that place it at higher levels of vibration. And these vibrations create states of peace, stability, and balance. And Luminous says, remember, a balanced mind has longevity. It will keep working for a long, long time. It won't wear down. It brings good health. It brings the ability to foster a well-governed impulse body. That's a great ability to have. And Cyrus says, the impulse body is also poorly understood by human society. Just like mental health is, the health of the impulse body is also very poorly understood. Emotional health is just as serious as mental health. But he said human societies punish emotions that are not considered acceptable. People whose emotions cannot be fathomed are easily discarded. Remember, emotional and mental health are closely intertwined. Sadly, society often chooses to take the simple way out, which is reject and discard. This is a common reaction to mental and emotional illness. Think for a moment how lonely that makes people with mental and emotional illnesses feel. Just think about it. They're put into a dark place by the very society that should be helping, protecting, and nurturing them. Here again, they both say, we urge each one of you to be vigilant. Don't take the emotions of others personally and shoot back at them. One of the key challenges in dealing with human beings today is that they are more self-centered than they've ever been, Cyrus says. The ego thrives in the self-center and it reacts badly to thoughts, words, actions, and emotions that do not appease it. But remember, you're all part of a beautiful and diverse humanity with such a rich mosaic of cultures, traditions, values, histories, arts, and more. And if you wish to thrive in this pluralistic world, you have to adopt some important mindsets. So I said, what are these mindsets? Cyrus said, I can suggest 4 very useful mindsets. 1, move out of your self-centers. 2, live with a deeper awareness of physical, mental, and emotional health. 3, respond to mental and emotional illnesses with the same empathy you show to people suffering from physical illness. And 4, help the mentally and emotionally ill as best as you can. And as a bare minimum, if you can't help them, don't chastise and reject them. That's the worst thing you can ever do, because the consequences of your actions and reactions can be devastating for them. So Cyrus said, now that you have a better understanding about the 3 bodies and how best to help yourselves and others, let us now look at the spiritual dimensions of suicide. Let me start by summarizing some key points. He says, 1, we have learned that harmony and balance are the key goals that the soul seeks to achieve. 2, that the soul is connected to a fragile biological body, a much stronger mind, and a very powerful impulse body. So think about those 3 levels of power. The soul can achieve its wholesome experiences and light of knowledge by engaging these 3 bodies with balance. That's the key, and enabling each body to flourish individually and collectively. These are 3 points I'd like to summarize before we go into the spiritual dimension. Now, to understand the spiritual dimension, Cyrus says, I want to share an analogy with you of what the soul encounters with its 3 bodies when harmony and balance are present and when they are absent. So he said, think of a circus in a huge, tall, domed tent. And then there's an acrobat who is traversing across the dome using a trapeze. You've all seen a trapeze. It's a horizontal bar hanging with 2 ropes. So the acrobat holds on to this bar as they swing back and forth. So now you think of the soul as the acrobat. And this acrobat is performing in a circus tent with a very high ceiling. The acrobat swings from one end of the tent to the middle of the tent. And then he jumps off from his trapeze to catch the next one. And then he swings to other parts of the circus tent on the next trapeze, and on and on and on. So the acrobat's show requires that he or she swings from trapeze to trapeze without falling onto the trampoline on the ground for a set period of time. During the show, the acrobat is having an exhilarating experience of swinging across the dome at high speeds and enjoying the thrill of leaving one secure handle and then being in the air for a few moments with no security, and then catching the next one onto the secure handle. So the acrobat switches between security and insecurity, high up in the air. Can you visualize this? Take a moment and imagine the acrobat's show where he or she just goes to the middle, lets go of the handle, floats in air, catches the next one, and this is how the show works, from trapeze to trapeze until the show is over. So the acrobat's act, his show, her show, is free, powerful, and fast, traversing the tent at great height with an exciting audience cheering on. So here, the acrobat is the soul in this analogy. And the traversing across the tent, from trapeze to trapeze, from security to insecurity, is its journey in the material world. All being played out in the presence of a huge audience. Now, most of the time, the acrobat completes the performance without falling. So you all complete your lives, Cyrus says, and experience it as best as you can, and then you depart when the show is over. This is what you all know as the normal course of life. Birth being the start of the show, death being the end of the show. So where does suicide come into all this? Suicide is analogous to the acrobat trying his or her best to swing between security of the trapeze handle and the insecurity between jumps. Sometimes while floating in the air between jumps, in the insecure space, the acrobat fails to catch the trapeze handle and falls to the ground because his or her focus or confidence or power or stability is not there when it is needed, and it has been lost as a result of all the numerous possibilities that we have discussed so far. Then Cyrus said, so that's suicide, where the acrobat falls. He says, now imagine, for example, if the audience were to start booing at the acrobat, this would make it even more difficult for the acrobat to jump between security and insecurity. So much so that it can make the acrobat fall down to the ground. So he or she is like the soul that tried its best to achieve balance and harmony within its three bodies, but has been unable to. This is suicide from a spiritual perspective. And Cyrus said, the good news is that there will always be another chance to try again and again and again through new lifetimes and opportunities. So this is the first dimension, spiritual dimension of suicide, which is failure to govern the three bodies in sync, failure to achieve balance and harmony within them. And that critical point is reached like the last straw, and the journey ends abruptly. So that's the first dimension of suicide. And Cyrus continued, he said, while there are other spiritual dimensions to suicide, this is one of the most common ones. And he said prayers for such souls is very helpful for them, because your positive thought, vibrations, and intercession can provide the soul with greater ability to overcome this challenge on its next try up the trapeze. So pray for them. Always pray for souls that have left this world through suicide, for it can help them a great deal, whether you know them or not. And also, while you pray for them, you seek their forgiveness too, Cyrus says, because as a humanity, you have also failed to care for them in the way you could have or should have. And refrain from judging the deceased or their families and loved ones. Leave them be in peace, Cyrus said. Remember, curiosity, being nosy, gossiping, judging the bereaved or the deceased, places you amongst the audience in the circus that boos the acrobat before he or she falls. Don't place yourself there. So love, compassion, and prayers is the best service you can render in such a circumstance. So Luminous said, okay, then there is the second dimension of suicide, which occurs when a person is mentally unaware of what he or she is doing. For example, patients suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's disease, where the conscious mind is disengaged. And he said this one is easier to comprehend. However, there is a more complicated example of such mental disengagement, which is where people are under the influence of excessive alcohol and drugs. And this form of suicide is also a result of diminished mental awareness. When you are so much under the influence of substances, you have diminished mental awareness, where rational thoughts are absent. So cases of dementia are much easier to help with because their presence is readily identifiable, more readily identifiable, and care can be provided for such patients to keep them safe. However, substance abuse is a lot more complicated and difficult. It's a difficult challenge because it is not always easy to determine how deeply afflicted a victim may be. Even parents don't often know how intensely their child may be into intoxicants, even though they may live under the same roof. The number of people taking alcohol and dangerous drugs, Cyrus said, is growing exponentially in the material world today, causing its victims to suffer from deep depression. And depression is a state that can trigger suicide, either suddenly or in a planned way. So he said, you should all be concerned about how fast the social and communication structures are changing in your world today. This is driving more and more people towards substance abuse. Social media does not help either, because it has become one of the main validation tools for people, particularly the young ones. It leaves them widely exposed to cruelty from rejection, negative peer pressure, cyberbullying, for example, is a whole host of very, very challenging situations that young people are put under through social media. Cyrus says direct human contact today is sorely lacking because life is played out online, which is dangerous and very unhealthy. He said, you were created as social, communal beings, and you were not created as inhabitants of illusionary virtual worlds. You weren't created that way. So if we go back to the analogy of the acrobat, then this second dimension of suicide, which is suicide due to diminished mental awareness, can be comparable to the acrobat having lost full control of his or her trapeze altogether, making falling to the floor inevitable. They've lost full control. Unless, of course, help is available in time. So this is the second dimension. But he said, however, in such instances too, the acrobat will keep having opportunities of new lifetimes to go back and perfect his or her show. So I asked, how can people help themselves and others overcome the challenges of social abuse and depression? What should they do? What should we do? So Luminous replied, firstly, take all the steps we told you about with respect to balancing the mind. A balanced mind is a healthy mind. So actively encourage others to do that. Different inputs, variety of inputs, balanced mind. Secondly, look vigilantly for signs of depression and substance abuse in your families, schools, and workplaces, for example. Take these signs seriously. Act upon them. Next is engage parents, doctors, school counselors, friends to work together to help people who are depressed, addicted, and/or stuck in toxic social media bubbles or other similar situations, for example. He said you can also mobilize families, businesses, opinion leaders, community leaders to create forums where people can interact with one another via direct human contact, restore direct human contact. And Lumina says you are an intelligent society. If you raise this issue at all levels of your families, communities, societies, and governments, you will find lots more solutions. What is important is that the process begin right away. So I asked, what percentage of all suicides would you say fall within the first two dimensions we have just talked about? Suicide from the inability to govern the three bodies, and suicide through diminished mental awareness. Cyrus replied, I would estimate over 99%, which suggests that the majority of souls have another chance or chances through new lifetimes to achieve their goals. So I asked, what about that small 1% we haven't talked about? Luminous replied, this is the third spiritual dimension of suicide, which is very rare. It's more rare. He said, in this dimension, a soul may make the deliberate election to end its journey, even though all three bodies are in sync and awareness is fully present. He said this is which is very rare, which is why we give the 1% number or less. So coming back to the analogy of the acrobat. In this third dimension, the acrobat is fully able to continue with the show because he or she has everything under control. But for some reason, which is difficult to speculate on, decides to simply end the show by deliberately falling onto the trampoline. In such a case, the soul has broken its soul bond or karmic bond. Now it is going to be difficult for the soul to get new chances to manifest, Cyrus says, in any of the seven worlds. The soul is now in a state where there is no ready path ahead. Therefore it may wander through the worlds without manifesting. because it doesn't have that ability of manifestation anymore. Remember, very, very small cases, number of cases. In such cases, he said, prayers and positive thoughts and higher vibrations from other souls can uplift the wandering soul and help it gain another chance at building a new soul bond by the grace of the Creator. So yes, there is hope. And in this case, he said, it starts its journey again from the beginning. Therefore, he said, prayers for souls that have dropped their physical form under such circumstances, prayers are crucial to help that soul back onto its journey. So you should pray, offer positive thoughts and vibrations for its benefit, whether you know the person or not. And we believe that your prayers do work because you are all interceding on behalf of that beloved soul. Now he said, fortunately, we believe that numerous souls in this situation, down in that 1% category, have been helped back on their journey by other souls through their deep love and compassion. Cyrus looked at me and said, why don't you relate the experience with the one such soul in Colombia? I said, fine. This was about more than 20 years ago. So there's someone I know extremely well. And this person and his wife, were participating in a convention of the light workers of South America. And this was taking place in Colombia. So this husband and wife flew from London. They traveled for about 30 hours before they got to the site. And the night before the event, which was in another place, they put everybody up in a hotel, which used to be an old monastery. So this couple, because the guy was one of the people who was going to lead the good parts of the conference, these people gave him and his wife the room, the best room in the hotel, which used to be the room of the bishop. And in this room, when you walk in, you have, beautiful furniture. It's very old, nice, marble floored bathrooms and all. Then there's another room next to the bedroom where there's tons of old Bibles. So this was like quite an amazing suite. And the couple went to sleep. And they were very tired, exhausted. And then suddenly in the middle of the night, the lights went on in the bathroom, the taps went on. So the guy wakes up and he goes, oh dear, what is this? And he immediately realizes that someone is calling out to get his attention. And he was fairly advanced spiritually, so he also understood what was going on, and he realized that this is a being, a life energy that is seeking help. So in his mind, he communicates with this energy, and he says, look, we are really grateful that we are, you are allowing us to stay in your place. We are your guests. We are exhausted. So please leave us be and let us rest. And being a humorous kind of guy, he says, you see my wife here, if she wakes up, you and I both have a problem. So why don't you leave us in peace? And the lights go off. Everything is calm. He's lying down. But he knows that this being, this beautiful energy, was right there near his bed. Didn't have a physical form, but this guy could feel its presence. And then he wakes up at 4 a.m. like he does every day. And he sits, but today he decides he's going to dedicate his full meditation and prayer to the benefit of this life energy, this being. And so he does. And this being had been waiting for more than 500 years in this place for someone to come, pray for him, and let him flow. And this guy dedicated his full prayer for him. And then when he woke up in the morning, there was no more energy there. The being was gone. So he rendered his spiritual service for this soul. We don't know the circumstances under which that soul was, that it had to wait this long, but when souls can't manifest, they are truly, truly, truly thirsting for our prayers. So we should offer it to them. Now, I've often wondered under what type of circumstances does this 1% of suicide occur? And then one day it dawned on me. I was watching a documentary, and it was rather disturbing, but I was curious because they were interviewing a guy whose job was that of an assassin. He lived in Pakistan. He used to go on motorbikes. He would stop at the motorbike at the traffic light. He would have details of the person. At the traffic light, he would just shoot the person and move on. So the interviewer is asking him, what do you feel when you do something like this? And he goes, it's my job. I have to do it. This is how I earn a livelihood. So he was very calm, cool, calm, collected, showing no remorse at all. He said, do you have any regret? He says, no, because if I don't, someone else will. But then this guy, according to the commentator, when they finished the interview, then they said, this guy actually killed himself. So now we started thinking about that interview again. And I said, what did he say? And then I played the interview over again. And he said, this was normal part of life. This was a job. This was his way of earning livelihood. He had no remorse. Okay. But he said, I cannot sleep anymore. He said, I don't know why, but I cannot sleep anymore. And that was where he dropped a clue. Because otherwise he showed no unusual emotions. So something inside of him probably died with his victims. And I surmised that possibly the entire web of hurt that his actions had caused through tragedies in so many lives, wives losing their husbands, parents losing their children, children losing their parents, or sheer loss of loved ones in dreadful circumstances of being assassinated. And he was only taking, he was so casual about it, $75 that he was just saying. But this type of hurt could have formed this web that probably shrouded him. And at some point, his soul may have chosen to end its journey, to put a stop to these tragedies. This is what dawned on me at the time, but I could be wrong. I was speculating. And Cyrus said, actually, you may not be wrong. He said, when you think about it deeper, it does make sense. It's also interesting to note that some of the scriptures talk about suicide in the context of this third dimension, where the soul has no forward way without help. But he said, one has to interpret the scriptures in the context of the prevailing time when they were written. Like with the assassin you just heard about, human slaughter in those days was rampant in those days, where the scriptures were revealed. Life had zero value. So this was a very common practice, and hence suicides of the third dimension may have been a lot more common in those days than they are today. People in the times of the scriptures were subjected to physical cages, Cyrus says. Today, humans live more and more in mental cages rather than physical cages. They are subjected to mental cages. Therefore, the suicides of the first and second dimensions, which are part of being in the mental cage, are far greater in number compared to suicides of the third dimension today. So like many other edicts, one cannot take the ordinances of the scriptures with respect to suicide in their literal sense today. It has to be contextual. You cannot take it in the literal sense without further introspection, research, and deliberation, Cyrus says. And this is something very important to recognize, especially in today's world. It is difficult enough for people to grieve the departure of their loved one through suicide without the added trauma of thinking that his or her soul is being eternally lost. The reality of today's world is not the same as it was several thousand years back. So I asked, can you share some insights on these mental cages you're talking about? I'm intrigued. And Cyrus said, today, humanity is heavily impacted by mental and emotional challenges by virtue of technology-driven fast pace of life as one big factor. And he said this is one of the biggest challenges because it creates mental cages in which people feel stuck, imprisoned, suffocated, and extremely pressured, for example. So he said also the increased exposure to virtual worlds is creating more and more dangerous mental cages every day with no end in sight. So what makes virtual worlds dangerous, I asked, because I think they're fine. And Cyrus replied, because no one today knows how to govern virtual worlds in order to keep people safe. A new virtual world is being created so fast every day that it's almost impossible to regulate them. They're being created everywhere, every day, in large numbers. You can't regulate them. He said today virtual worlds are pretty much ungoverned, like the world was in the days of the Wild West, or the days of the barbarians before the dawn of civilization, or where the Romans and Jews and Arabs were before the arrival of the major religions, their predecessors. That's where the world is today. In their case, a new ethical order was necessary for them at the time, and it came via religion, and religion transformed them to civilized society. And Cyrus said a new norm of civilization is required today that addresses the present day challenges and realities. And I asked, how can we adapt to this new norm of civilization today and in the future, especially with AI taking over human mental ability? These machines can do in seconds what our minds take months to do. Luminous replied, the future is very exciting, filled with challenge and opportunity. So embrace it with confidence, not fear. He said, we see humanity's next evolution as being driven by nature and spirituality. We expect to see an ethical evolution which will be able to sustain the civilization of virtual worlds while drawing upon technology to achieve this. He said, think of it as a new world order at a deeper human level. So why spirituality, I asked. Why not something else? And Luminous replied, with AI, for example, taking over the function of the human mind, where will your reality as a human being exist? You will be subjected to endless illusions via virtual worlds and landscapes, so much so that these illusions will overshadow and camouflage your reality. You won't even know what's reality anymore. And it said, in such a complex and manipulated world or worlds, how will you be able to differentiate between what is real and what is illusion? He said, the only way will be through your spirituality. While you can have mental and physical cages, Luminous says the soul can never be caged. It is your key to identifying and knowing the real you in all virtual worlds. It doesn't matter what illusions you flow into. Your soul is your only true identity and reality. He said, we see this aspect, spiritual aspect, growing in humanity at levels never seen before. And it will be driven by necessity, he says. And nature, of course, will help, because grounding in the material world comes through direct connection that we have with nature. So nature and spirituality, these two, you will be able to manage and experience all the virtual worlds that come your way and evolve enough to govern them correctly. So I said that the future of humanity may be far more different than you have ever imagined. He said, if you told a barbarian in the world what the world would be like post-civilization, he or she would not be able to comprehend such a future. That's where humanity is today, at the doorstep of an unimaginable and remarkable future. So Luminous says, to wrap up today, let's quickly look at the fourth spiritual dimension of suicide, where suicide becomes a natural path the soul takes to leave the world. A good example would be some of the native Indian Aboriginal people who leave their clan at a certain age or state of health and go into the forest to die. They innately know that it is time for them to leave the world. You can call that suicide too, Luminous says, or you can consider it their natural passage out of this world. Wow, what great depth of knowledge we have been exposed to today. I thank Cyrus and Luminous for enlightening us today with their wisdom. My dear friends, I believe we can all resonate with the analogy of the acrobat and the trapeze show. It's a very simple analogy, but very deep and profound. It is a simple way to internalize the more complex spiritual dimensions of suicide. So I hope you've all gained a better insight into suicide and how we can help those afflicted by it, and even more important, how we can accelerate the prevention of suicide going forward. We're just 2 minutes over, but I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all deeply for being here today, bringing your light and positive energy. I'm deeply grateful to have you here, and I pray that you may all be blessed by our Creator. May you be blessed. May His light be with you to help you, guide you, protect you, and love you always. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you again in the very near future.